are listening to The Story Points, a podcast where the worlds of product and engineering converge to delve into topics that resonate with us in our daily professional lives.
Hello everyone, welcome back to The Story Points. Now, imagine this. You're watching a sci-fi movie where robots are running the world, making art, driving cars, and maybe even deciding what you're having for dinner. Sounds crazy, right? Well, what if I told you we're kind of already there? This episode is special because it's the first in a multi-part series where we will uncover AI as it happens. We'll break down the myths, the tech, and everything in between. So, if you've ever been curious about AI but don't know where to start, you are in the right place. Luckily, I'm not alone in figuring this all out. With me today is my co-host, friend, and someone who spent way too much time arguing with AI models, Roopak. Welcome to the show.
Cool. Thank you, PK. And I prefer to think of it as educating them. And someone's got to keep the bots in check.
Right. Fair point. So let's start with the basics. AI, LLMs, machine learning. Like, what's the deal? Are we on the brink of becoming characters in like a Black Mirror episode or something?
Cool. That's a good question. Let's demystify this. So AI is not some all-knowing robot overlord, right? It's basically really fancy math predicting the next word or image or making decisions based on patterns which it has learned. And specifically talking about LLMs or large language models, like the one helping writing this episode. Don't worry, folks, we're still human. They're trained on massive amounts of text, making them sound pretty smart, but don't be fooled. They have exactly no idea what they're talking about.
So it's like this friend who sounds super confident about everything, but is actually just winging it.
Right.
Like I think I'm reminded of Eliza, which was like the OG chatbot from the 60s. Like it was designed to mimic a therapist, right? But all it really did was it just told back what the users said to it. Like a super confident yet completely clueless friend. And people were convinced that it actually understood them. So if someone said, how are you doing? I'm feeling sad today. Eliza would say, oh, are you feeling sad today? Why are you feeling sad today? So it would sort of rephrase whatever was given to it as an input. And people thought it was amazing.
Right. So AI in that sense is world's best bluffer, I would say. And Eliza, like you said, was a great example of how easily we humans project intelligence onto machines, even when there is none. Although today's models are a fair bit better than what we saw in the 60s, but still, it is AI after all, artificial intelligence after all, right? And it's still following patterns and not actually thinking.
Okay, so with Eliza as one reference point, but that was like decades ago, there is so much that has happened in AI in the last few years or maybe a couple of years. For all of us just getting started on AI, can you give us a simple frame of reference or a mental model of a landscape of what kind of problems AI can solve today?
Right. So for someone who is just stepping into AI, I have a mental model which will help you understand what sort of problems you would encounter in terms of solving the user's problem. So let's start with this. So I think a lot of us would be aware of this idea of supervised and unsupervised learning in AI or machine learning.
Right.
Now, let's start with supervised learning. So supervised learning is all about knowing the input, the output, and asking the model, hey, can you predict or learn a function which maps the input to the output? Right? Now, there are two aspects in this. One aspect is when your output has a discrete space. Let me explain what that means.
Okay.
So let's take an example. You have images of handwritten numbers 0 to 9, right?
Okay.
And you have to predict whether a given image is what number, right? So in this case, this is a discrete output space because you have a limited number of options in front of you or in front of the model in terms of what it can predict given an image, right? So this is supervised in the sense that if you have your data in such a way where you have images, along with that, you've written that, okay, this is a 0,
Right.
this is a 1, and the model learns this and it knows that my output should be either 0, 1, 2, and so on and so forth. So this is a supervised and discrete case. Similarly, you can have a supervised and continuous case. Now imagine a model which has to, given all sorts of inputs, it has to predict what is the temperature going to be tomorrow. So now temperature can be within a range. Let's say it can be within 25 degrees Celsius to 35 degrees Celsius, but it can have continuous values, right?
Right.
25.1, 25.2, and like that. So this is a case of supervised where you could still give the model data in the form of whatever your input factors are, the city, location, and everything,
Right.
the wind and all, and the actual temperature which was there at that point of time or that during that day. And the AI sort of picks that up. It learns that this is a continuous output which it has to predict.
Got it.
So in supervised, these are the two cases, and similarly we have similar two cases in unsupervised. So let me give an example. So imagine that you have a large user base in your product and you don't know how your users are grouped, right? So you could put it in an AI algorithm. There are certain AI algorithms which help you do this, but what they would help you do is that given your users, they could group them into a discrete number of groups.
Right.
Let's in technical jargon, it's called clusters.
Right.
So these are clustering algorithms. Basically, you're not telling them that, hey, group my customers into these 3 groups. All you're saying is, hey, these are my customers. Can you figure out some groups in this?
Right.
So this is a case of unsupervised and discrete setup.
Okay. So we talked about discrete and continuous, but I think just for the benefit of the listeners, supervised and unsupervised learning. Supervised is where you're giving the inputs in a form of data where you have labeled the data. For example, you will say, this is a picture and this picture means this is a cat. This is a picture, this picture means it's a dog. So you've labeled the data and therefore the machine learns it in a supervised manner.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when there's data where you are just giving it a bunch of, let's say, temperatures, locations, cities, it needn't know that this is a city, this is a, temperature, so on and so forth, right? You're not giving it any more inputs apart from what is there in that set of data.
Right.
And that's unsupervised learning.
Right. So in unsupervised, the only nuance is that your algorithm decides what the output would be. So for example, you want let's say you're feeding your data into a clustering algorithm, you would obviously get a cluster or a bunch of clusters of your data out of it, right?
Got it.
So depending on what task you're doing, you might want to decide that what sort of algorithm you want to use.
Okay. Let's touch upon the last one, the unsupervised learning, continuous.
Exactly. So this is where today's Gen AI systems, I would say, fit in, where you have a bunch of data and you want the model to learn the patterns in it, and your output space is also continuous, which means let's put this into perspective. You have a large language model, right? You are giving it a lot of text data,
okay,
which it learns, and what it predicts is a continuous set of words, which are not discrete, obviously, right? Because you could have n number of words or so many words which the LLM could predict.
Right.
So this is where most of the Gen AI systems would probably fit in.
Okay. So it's like there's one set of problems where we're saying, let's take an example of Netflix. So you have an AI system which can tell you this is the next show that you can watch on Netflix, whereas continuous outputs are where it can actually write a script for the next Netflix movie.
Exactly. You got that right.
Cool. That sounds pretty cool, actually. Okay. So we've talked about how AI is looking at patterns and not actually understanding what you're saying. It's pretty dumb in that sense. But it's also very confident about what it is giving you. So it is almost like a overconfident intern, but it needs supervision, right?
Right.
Cool. Okay. So now let's go to the next segment where we will take a few buzzwords and we will try and break it down. I'll start with one. So LLMs, you've kind of touched upon it. Large language models. Now these are AI models trained on massive data sets to predict and generate human-like text. Examples being ChatGPT, Bard, Claude, Llama. There are many of them today. Just taking this back and connecting it to the whole patterns that we were talking about. Essentially, what we're saying is we've given it a bunch of inputs. It can be text from Wikipedia, whatever, open source data sets and all of that. And it is actually stored patterns of these texts or whatever in some form, numbers or string of numbers, whatever it is. When we give it an input, let us say today, to say, I want to eat, complete the sentence, it will just predict what the next thing could be based on the data it's already got. So that's the large language model that we're talking about.
Right.
Cool.
So just again, to put this into perspective, imagine me training an LLM on data set collected from maybe just within India.
Right.
I want to eat, that LLM might predict the next word to be idli or paratha
or biryani.
Right. But maybe with a global data set or a Western data set, it might predict pizza, burger, pasta, something like that. So this also highlights how important data set is in training, and probably we'll touch base upon this in another episode.
Absolutely. Cool. The next one, over to you, Roopak.
Cool. Since we're talking about LLMs, so I think one thing which anybody studying or looking at LLMs comes across is RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation. It's basically when an LLM or AI system combines what it's been trained on with real-time information retrieval. So imagine if AI had a built-in Google search before answering your question. So it wouldn't just rely on old data. It'll have updated knowledge and it'll use that to answer your question.
Nice. So if I ask for people who are listening from Bangalore, you will know Vidyarthi Bhavan, the OG Dosa place, and a few others. So if I ask, is Vidyarthi Bhavan open today? It'll actually go check Google if it's a Sunday or whatever, if it's closed, and then come back to you. And therefore, the output that you get is more like higher in confidence and all of that, more accurate.
Right. And also it's latest because LLMs, when they're trained on data, there is a cutoff, right? So let's say you will generally see that this model has a cutoff of December 2024, which means it knows all the events that have happened till December 2024, but you're querying it today, so you need updated knowledge.
Right.
So that's where RAG kind of helps.
Got it. Cool. What about AGI? I hear it, read it a lot.
Right, that's the buzzword which tops the charts, right? So AGI is nothing but artificial general intelligence. It's like the holy grail of AI. Imagine, machines doing all the thinking, all the reasoning, building all the tools, maybe upgrading itself to a better version based on circumstances, and humans just don't have to do anything.
So it's like the intern now came out of the probationary period and has been promoted.
Right.
And-
I look at it as intern now has become God.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah.
But this is still
obviously.
a hypothetical sort of state,
Exactly.
and everyone sort of believing that it's going to be possible, but nobody knows when. Nobody knows how long. A lot of people are also saying this is not possible as well. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think partially that's because there are so many moving parts, and we talk about this in our product and software development as well, right? There are so many moving parts to software, and AI is also software, right? So making sure that all those moving parts work in synergy
Right.
and harmony is kind of challenging right now. Maybe again in future this might improve, but that making sure that things work together well has led us to creation of agentic systems.
Right.
Right. And probably you can talk about it, PK, if you have.
Well, so before we go to agents and agentic systems and all of that, I just want to touch upon how the AGI is almost like a statement in the past where people said crypto is the new currency of the world.
Exactly.
There is the end state, the ideal end state, but there's a lot of stakeholders to kind of get to that point. So I think AGI, while from a academic or a research perspective, and it feels very glamorous and sexy to computer scientists and all of that, maybe there is a whole lot more set of groups which will actually come to the table and talk about this and have a say in this, right? It's not like governments and regulators are going to let this happen as it goes along. So
Exactly.
I feel it's a lot more complicated to kind of get to that state
Definitely.
in terms of actually seeing it around.
Right. And everybody defines it in their context. So recently, for example, Microsoft and OpenAI defined it as ability to generate $1 billion in revenue.
Wow.
So for them, this is what AGI is.
Okay, so there is this famous dialogue from Munna Bhai MBBS, right, where he says, "Agar मैं हल चलाऊंगा तो बैल क्या करेगा भाई?" So it's like this: if AI is doing everything, what are we doing here? Like,
Right.
what's the whole? Which is why I think a lot of artists are saying AI generated content is like an insult to life. Like,
Exactly.
what's the point of this? When what are we going to do?
Right.
So it's creepy. It's also fascinating in some sense, but yeah, it's all packaged in AI today. We're all
Exactly.
experiencing it together. Anyway, so agents and agentic AI.
Cool. So agentic AI is where things get really wild, and basically it's about AI acting autonomously, and like we discussed earlier, that's maybe one baby step towards AGI which we could take. And basically we see agents breaking down tasks and achieving goals without direct human input. And to give you again a perspective, think of Jarvis from Iron Man, where AI makes decisions and takes actions on its own, maybe sometimes from human approval, sometimes completely autonomously.
Right.
Yeah.
Another example is I've placed an order in a restaurant and I call the waiter and say, "Hey, can you check what's happening? Why is it not here? It's been 20 minutes. So is it fair to say, I think it's fair to say that the what the waiter is doing at that point is sort of what an agent does. It's a very specific
Yes.
request that the agent is fulfilling.
Right.
Right? Okay, cool. I'll take the next one, which is prompts. So we talked about LLMs, we talked about AGI and all of that. But the way LLMs are being consumed today. So think of, in my mind, I'm comparing this to the time when we got introduced to Google.
Right.
Right? So when first Google came around, we were all typing all sorts of things in Google and Google was giving its results and we were very fascinated with it. But over a period of time, we figured out, what do we put into Google for it to give us the information that we need?
Right.
And I think that is the journey that we need to take with LLM as well. Today we are putting all sorts of things in there, and LLM is giving us answers. We're like, oh, this is so cool, this is so good. But I think we need to get to a point where we can prompt is basically the way in which you actually get the AI to generate a response that's useful to you.
Right.
Anything that you want to add on, Roopak?
So it's prompt is like one of the building blocks on getting started with LLMs, and I would say it's really important. So if you're someone who is getting started with AI, and generally LLMs are a good starting point to getting started with AI. So I would say prompting is something you should definitely check out. A lot of companies, OpenAI, Claude, they have their guides of how to write a good prompt.
Yep.
And apart from prompt, there are certain other levers which you can use to tune your LLM's output. So I'll probably mention two. So one is temperature, which you can use to control the creativity of the LLM.
Okay.
And the other is presence penalty, where if you want the LLM to generate, to not repeat the content which it is generating. Let's say you ask it to write 3 paragraphs about a topic, and you see it kind of repeating certain words, right? So you could use the presence penalty to tune that so that it doesn't kind of reiterate what it's saying.
Right.
Yeah. So just
Cool.
adding to what else you can do apart from prompt.
We should definitely do one episode on just prompts. And
Exactly.
yeah. Okay. Cool. One last one. Fine tuning.
Yeah, fine tuning is interesting. So I'll go with an example. So as we all know, LLMs are trained on all sorts of knowledge, right? And typically you could ask it anything from any domain and it'll come back with an answer. Sometimes, like we said, with a lot of confidence. But imagine that you have to focus or shift the focus of the LLM on one single domain, right? And maybe because that's the area you're deploying your LLM into, or you want it to become specialized there, you have some more data, some proprietary data,
right,
which you can use to narrow down the domain. So that's what fine tuning actually is, making sure that the LLM is kind of focused only on one domain when it's generating the text.
Got it. So a specialized company might find it useful to take a general, like an LLM,
right,
and then feed its own data to kind of make it work better for them. Cool. I'll take one other last one, and then we'll kind of close this episode, which is hallucination, because it's out there, and anyone who's starting AI will talk about hallucinating, right? It's
right.
not the hallucinating that others are thinking about. So it's a legit.
It's a legit hallucination.
Exactly.
It's not an induced hallucination.
So we talked about how LLMs are basically, they've consumed lots of data, they've stored patterns of the data, and then in a continuous output, they're continuously generating the next set of words, the next word, the next word, the next word. Now, what happens is when you keep asking the LLM to kind of continuously throwing outputs in one specific thread, at some point, or in any instance for that matter, the output might be something which is completely irrelevant, but it'll be super confident in projecting that as this is the output that you want.
Exactly. I can relate to this.
And that is what you call as a hallucination.
A hallucination. And this is something we do maybe in exams, in vivas.
Where we are completely confident this is the answer, and the teacher has to
exactly
accept it. So, and this is, I think, very interesting because nobody knows why specifically hallucinations happen, right?
Yeah, I can give some context on this.
Go on.
Like a little bit of technical context. So basically, let's imagine that you are an LLM, right? And you're given that vast information to learn. What you're actually now doing is you are learning the probability of the next word,
Right.
given the previous few words. Now, when you're predicting the next word through these probabilities, at some point you will see that um, you're you're at a situation where the probability of the next word is very low,
Mhm.
right? But you still have to predict it because that's the only word you have, right?
Right.
And that's when we as humans see hallucination happening, because you are saying something which is highly unlikely,
Right.
right? But we know that, but LLM also knows that this is highly unlikely, but it has to predict something, so it ends up predicting something which has lesser probability because that's all it has.
Again, very relatable to the Viva person asked me this question. I don't know what to say, but I have to say something. So let me just say something.
Let me just say what I know.
Cool. Okay. So, well, this has been a mind is equal to blown conversation. We've learned that AI isn't magic. It's basically some fundamental data, maths, patterns, and a bit of overconfidence.
Right.
So, yeah, I think
Exactly. And for all our listeners, keep asking questions. The more we understand AI, the better we can use it to shape its future and to shape our future as well.
right. And I think I'd also want to add that because we're doing a multi-series and this is the first of them, it'll be great if our users are able to comment and tell us what they want us to talk about as a next step in their learning journey. That'll
Right.
also inspire us to kind of think about probably doing that right away or stacking it up in a relevant fashion. So, yeah, I think that's a wrap for today with that. Don't forget to subscribe to the Story Points and we'll catch you in the next episode. Thank you.